On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Siddharth Ram. He's the CTO of Velocity Global. We're going to be talking about hackathons and how the hackathons spur innovation. We're going to be diving into some of the benefits, some of the observations of issues with hackathons, impact on scheduling, developer experience. We're going to be covering everything and all hackathon goodness with Siddharth. Siddharth, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Amir. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So before we dive into the hackathon, I'm super interested to kind of get those views. Tell us what Velocity Global does so that everyone's aware before we start the conversation.
Yeah. So, when you think about the employment workspace, increasingly our work is borderless. That is, we are working with people all over the world. But the reality is hiring and compliance to taxation, to various rules around benefits or so on are actually very complex. And so what Velocity Global does is rebuild systems that break down these borders and allows companies to hire anywhere and retain their employees while being completely compliant to the local regulations. So that's the business we are in.
So we're going to dive in, talk about hackathons, how it impacts innovation, and all the learnings that go with it. Before we do, maybe at a top level, I think everyone would do well if they understood what a hackathon looks like for Velocity Global, just to get some context in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does a hackathon look like? It's essentially 4 days of completely uninterrupted work for most people in engineering, for actually everyone in engineering, because you have to actually take permission not to participate. And for many people in product as well and design who choose to participate in it. And actually it's become broader than that. Now we have people from our support team and our product operations team who also participate in it and actually make it really effective by providing that line of sight to customers. So 4 days, you do nothing but work on your problem. And at the end of the 4th day, on the 5th day, you actually have what we call lightning talks. So each team has to present and has to show what outcomes they've driven. So there's not like doing research projects. Oh, I'm going to learn about Gen AI. No, this is not the place. We want to drive impact for customers. So the only rule is you have to pick a project which will be impactful. Right? On the 5th day, each team gets 5 minutes to actually present out to the executive leadership team. I exclude myself. It's our CEO is very keen on always being a participant in that. So it's typically 3.5 to 4 hours of 5 minutes talks given by every single team. So that's what it looks like.
That sounds like a really exciting time. Obviously, I like the fact that you have to actually get approval to not participate. So obviously, it's important to the org. I guess based on what you said, and maybe we'll work a little backwards on this based on that. You mentioned obviously people have 5 minutes to present. When they are presenting and they're presenting to the executive team, what is the executive team looking for in some of the solutions that are being brought to the table?
So it's all about, the three. So last time we did this, there were 3 criteria we used. The first one was, how well did you understand the problem? That is, did you connect with customers? Did you connect with other parts of the organization and really understand this is the problem? The second part of it is, how complete was the solution? Right? I mean, so you build something, did it really address the problem? How far did you get? And, and the third thing is, what were your learnings from this? So one of the things we are always trying to do is, I believe a real engineer is what I call a product engineer. And what I mean by that is, you need line of sight to the customer and you need to really, immerse yourself in customer empathy and really understand what problems they're having. Because at the end of the day, the code you write is what will be experienced by your customer. So when you have that customer empathy, that allows you to really become a well-rounded engineer. And that's what we're always striving for. And these hackathons are actually a way of getting to understand the customer and the problems that they are facing.
We're gonna dive into the customers in a second, but I wanted to go back to the developers. So, obviously, it sounds very exciting when you look at the actual engineers and the people who participate. Obviously, it seems like there's a lot of, maybe team building going on. There's teams. What is the impact on that developer experience? Because they obviously have 4 days to kind of, let their imaginations run.
We actually do something. So every quarter, I measure what's called the developer NPS. And the developer NPS is just one simple question that we ask. Would you recommend this code base to a friend? Now, in addition, of course, we do all the usual things that you think about, like, the employee engagement surveys and those kind of things. And so last quarter, so these hackathons are something, we call it Ship It. We run it every quarter. And last quarter, it so happened that our employee engagement surveys or this developer NPS question actually went out a week after our hackathon, right? And I'll tell you that engineers are always the happiest at the end of that week. And I saw numbers which I've never seen before, so I know that there is like just this enjoyment, that happiness that you get this time and space to work on what you think is a priority, as opposed to having your manager or your product folks. Not that I'm dissing anyone here, but like engineers know where the problems are in the code, right? If you give them the freedom, they will go fix it. And so it actually is really impactful on the morale of the team in a very, very significant way.
I guess and I don't know if you have the metrics on this, I was just kind of curious, when you guys look at the end of the hackathon and you do a quarterly, is there any metrics of how many of the projects end up being used within production?
Yeah. So the goal at the hackathon is typically, so the way I started it out, and it has evolved a little bit as I've learned better, but the way it started out was it's the FedEx model, or I call it the USPS model. That is, you got to deliver to production in 3 days, right? So that was the benchmark we set. Now, it turned out that some teams became incredibly ambitious and kind of took on projects which actually could not be done in 3 days. And I didn't want to tell them no, because some of these projects are absolutely amazing. But the scope is so large, you can't hope to safely get it into production in 3 days. So this actually creates a real problem, particularly with the product folks, because we do quarterly planning. So at the beginning of the quarter, we have committed, this is what our output metrics looks like. This is how we're going to move the needle. This is the work that needs to be done in order to get to those output metrics, right? And then the hackathon takes place, and then it's like, oh my God, do we continue doing what we are doing, or should we pivot and do this? So it's a wonderful problem to have. It's a problem, but it's a wonderful problem where we actually have to go back to the drawing board and say, look, I think we need to be changing our plans on what we are going to do because this thing has come up. But in addition, there are a number of smaller projects which actually go into production, which is actually fantastic. So last time, I think we had 8 projects which went into production at the end of 3 days. And here's the kicker. The things that you do not realize are important to customers are some of the things that actually get done. And my favorite story from this is a few years back. This engineer you got these transaction lines in a ledger kind of thing. All he did was, and it was kind of a complex code base, but he figured out how to color it so that it kind of looks like alternate colors so that it's easy to distinguish between them. That became the single biggest reason for a net increase in the net promoter score that quarter. So sometimes it's the smaller things that you don't expect. Those are total surprises about what kind of customer impact it can really drive. So it's hard to kind of predict all this and build this in and do things top down. It's better to actually let engineers take a crack at something which you normally wouldn't have paid too much attention to.
I guess you mentioned 2 things, product, which makes me think of product roadmap, and then obviously you mentioned customers. But to kind of back to the product team, this could, you mentioned, obviously this could be impacts to the roadmap, to what the product team already envisioned. How integrated is, and you mentioned the product and design early on, that it's expanded to include them, but I just was curious, like when something like this is happening, you're finding, like with the example you just provided, requires you to go back to the drawing board, requires you to re-examine some of the features you're looking to ship, and obviously customer commitments. Where does the product team fit in that interaction with them when it comes to their roadmap? And obviously, it's not their roadmap, but the roadmap that you guys are trying to execute on.
So, like I said, it's a little bit of a wonderful problem that we have. But here's the trick with these hackathons. We call it Ship It, by the way. And the trick with the hackathons is really to actually include the product and the design team in this and actually draw them into the excitement. And the reality is they actually want to participate. And, the product leader over here is actually incredibly supportive of it. So the moment they're also involved, they're also vested in the outcome. And therefore, it actually becomes relatively easier. I won't say it's always easy to kind of reconcile and say, look, we got to put this in front of our customers. This is actually wonderful. The other part of it, I'd say, which, I do have a harder time with is, and this kind of goes into how I think about a fiscal allocation of monies. There's some work which is done, which is highly technical in nature, like doing tech modernization or removing complexity from the code, which sometimes product and design doesn't have too much of an understanding of, right? And those are things I will go and fight for because, those are the things which make our engineers way more productive. So if someone has been able to untangle, and the way I approach it is, I always think about what are the parts of our code which has the highest amount of volatility combined with complexity. Because if you have just one of the two, it doesn't, you don't really want it as a target. But if something is really complex and it changes all the time, you actually do want engineers to think about attacking it. If an engineer chooses to work on that, I will figure out how to fund that work if they've made significant progress, right? Because again, I'm thinking about the developer NPS score, I'm thinking about the employee engagement. That's where you get the employee engagement and the improvements in developer NPS when you take away the complexity and simplify, volatile parts of your code base.
When you mention obviously the customers, and we're trying to find these features that potentially will impact the customer, right? And I guess you mentioned the term unintended consequences, or maybe they're Easter eggs for the customer, things that they didn't, or maybe the things that they won't even notice, right? Like you mentioned infrastructure improvements and things like that. When you're thinking about the customer and when your team is about to start to ship it and you guys are trying to pick that theme, how do you help your team, or how does the team align towards thinking about the customer? Because I guess it could be easy to kind of dive into code and try to solve technical problems and lose sight of the customer in the midst of all that.
Yeah. So look, here's how we do things. We have got an operations/customer support team, which is actually very much in touch with customers, who kind of knows what customers are looking for. We have an engineering on-call program where we encourage engineers to actually reach out to customers and have conversations with them. So those are the inputs into the process. We create a backlog of possible things to work on based on our input from our partners in other teams, as well as input directly from customers gained firsthand through engineers. So we have this backlog of items. Now, the trick is, you cannot tell an engineer you need to go work on this. This is a completely bottoms-up event, right? No one, including the execs, can go and tell an engineer, we need you to work on this, right? So what we have is people trying to cajole engineers into, hey, maybe you should be considering working on this, but at the end of the day, it's all about bottoms up. It's about self-organizing. It's about picking your own projects. It's about selecting your own team. No one is allowed to tell you what to work on. But we do try to have that line of sight to customers through means. Here is your backlog of potential items to work on. Very often what we do is a theme. So for example, the last ship that we had, which was 3 weeks ago, the theme was centered around AI and how we use generative AI to improve our product. Teams don't have to work on that. But what we do is we offer training, we set teams up for success if they do want to work on it, offer expertise as appropriate. But engineers select the projects that they want to, but most engineers actually want to have a huge impact, and they end up selecting things from that list.
Interesting. I guess when you're when you're circling back with customers and maybe it's the product team, the customer success team, and you guys are getting the feedback that something from the ship it has gone live and somebody's using it. How do you guys celebrate that?
Boy, I tell you, first of all, it's just a rush. I mean, I've experienced it myself as an engineer, and I can see it from other engineers also. Like, for example, a compliment comes in, wow, you guys did this, this is so amazing. That really makes people's day. So again, and the thing is, it really reinforces, we are here to serve our customers better. That's why we are all here. And having that customer first and customer empathy mentality, just improves the morale of the team, improves our productivity. If this whole idea of ship it, was based on, there's the book by Dan Pink called The Drive. You might have run across it, and he has a fantastic TED talk on this topic also. But it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So the purpose piece of it, particularly, that gets reinforced by actually drawing that connection back to customers.
I was just thinking, we've been talking all about the good stuff, and when I do an episode, sometimes I'm like, I gotta remember to ask, about the learnings, because all the good stuff sounds great, but there's stuff underneath that you've probably had to learn, go through, deal with. Hackathons, I guess, you guys call it ship it. Your ship it hackathon. Hackathons are not always done well. I guess everyone has different experiences with it. Sometimes people view it as, I got to take time away from my project. I got to go do this. I got to come back to it. It's not always as interesting or as exciting or as productive as what you guys are doing. So based on what you've maybe just seen as the evolution of your ship it hackathon and kind of learnings of how you guys have improved it, are there any piece of advice that you would have for people that do hackathons and are looking to maybe optimize it?
So the first thing I'd acknowledge is not like we are without our problems. We have our own set of problems to deal with. In particular, there we have quarterly commitments, and there's grousing around the bench. What the heck? You're going to take a week away, and we have got these tight deadlines. I get that. We are going to do it anyway, right? Because it has such a huge impact on things. But there are a few things I can say you should be doing. So for one of the things we try to do is align these events with the beginning of the quarter. Well, there's still a lot of, we do sprint zero in which a bunch of design work and so on is going on. So, we are not under as much pressure as we are during other times of the year, right? So that's one advice I'd offer. The second thing is, I think you've got to go all in. I don't think you can piecemeal this or say, oh, this team is going to do a hackathon this week and this other team is. You got to go all in, because that switch in the energy in the organization is really palpable, right? Everyone is out to compete. Everyone is out to, kind of in a very healthy way, one up other teams and say, I bet I can take on this big thing. People stay long hours and work longer than they do normally, right? So that energy in the system, everyone sees that. The output is just prodigious. So you take away, actually, if I can tell you, Amir, if I wind by the clock, the first time I did this hackathon was because I was just talking to an engineer. It wasn't at Velocity Global, it was at a different employer. And, there were 1,700 engineers there. I was just talking with an engineer, I said, hey, we got to fix this problem. And he says, look, I just need 3 uninterrupted days. Can you get me 3 uninterrupted days? So, I extrapolated that. I went to my manager and said, I think we should give everyone 3 extra days. Can we do that? And she said, yes, go for it. Right? So that's how we started out, by saying that, look, your productivity is going to be completely different if the entire company is given 3 days to work on whatever they have to do, with the constraint that, you got to come back and show us what you have done. So that's kind of the genesis. And that actually has worked really well at all 3 places I've been at since that initial event that we had held. There are always problems that get introduced by this, but I think net the outcome completely outweighs any negatives that this process might have. But you got to go all in. You got to do it for everyone.
Where do the engineering leaders, obviously they have timelines, they have schedules, which we obviously mentioned, they have to factor these 4 days in. When it comes to the Ship It Hackathon, what is their role?
So engineers, including me, use this time to write code. Right? So everyone writes code. At the end of the day, people who are managers or execs, we have come up through the ranks, and it's helpful for us once a quarter to go say that, hey, you know what? I have time to get back to where I came from and really put myself in the shoes of the engineers. Right? So every ship it, I write code. That's what I do, and pretty much most managers, not all managers, but most managers are also participating in it. Yeah, so it's really a good way to bond with your team as well.
Yeah, I like that. We hear about the hands-off manager and moving away from the code, but obviously I really like the fact that you can still relate to those engineers and some of the challenges of what they see in those 4 days. I guess as the leadership group, and you guys are seeing this hackathon, come closer on the calendar. You guys have deliverables, you have timelines. Obviously, there's pressure. When you guys have to take these 4 days away, how do you bake that into the timeline?
So look, first of all, there's probably a completely separate and different topic, but we instrument our complete product development, the product development pipelines that we have. So, I can tell you with reasonable confidence how much time certain tasks are going to take, how many story points we should actually commit to. This is just, it's over years of actually collecting metrics and really understanding, what pace we can move at, right? So, Ship It becomes part of our calendar, right? So I tell teams, that capacity for that week, you need to remove it from what you're doing. And you also need to account for the fact that there'll be certain overhead from it post event. Because there are certain projects you'll say, no, we need to figure out how to get to fruition. So there are certain other projects we may choose to deprioritize in order to get these things in. So over time, what we are doing is we are actually building a system where some of the shocks from the hackathon event from Ship It actually get absorbed into the system because it's been planned for and it's been expected. Still not a perfect system because you can do it's like what was that saying? Plans are nothing, planning is everything, right? So things still go south sometimes, but it really helps that we are planning for some of it to happen anyway.
Final question around budgeting. Obviously, somebody's got to apportion budget for this. How have you seen that work best in terms of having this type of R&D hackathon budget?
Yeah, so first of all, this is also a time for people to have fun. We actually invite people to figure out how they can have fun, and actually we reward teams which actually have the most fun. Right. The second thing is food is taken care of. Lunches we will deliver wherever you are. If you're working late, we'll get you dinner. So all that is taken care of so that you're just focused on the code. As far as budgeting is concerned, this is actually part of, like everyone else, we also do annual planning, and then there is a certain spend rate. All this is actually included in our calculations of how much we're going to be spending. And in addition, what I would say is one of the things I track, and this is actually a good discipline for other leaders, in my opinion, is, fiscal allocations I break into 3 buckets. There's, the tech modernization, the sustaining engineering, product roadmap. So product roadmap is the stuff we need to do for our customers. Tech modernization is, you're doing a lift and shift to AWS or whatever your favorite cloud provider is, or you're moving to managed services or whatever. And sustaining work is, you're dealing with production issues. You're doing a necessary software upgrade, those kinds of things. So I create budgets for each one of these 3 categories with the goal that the work we do via Ship It actually drives down our sustaining work significantly, right? And actually increases our capacity to do more product development. So it is actually accretive to financial management that we do here.
I love the way you approach it, and it sounds like very much heads down, hands down. Everyone is all in, which I think you made one of the points, which I think one of my takeaways as I'm thinking about this is everyone's got to be all in, managers included. So I really think that's awesome. So if someone wants to reach out to you, obviously we haven't covered this topic to exhaustion. There's tons of areas we could explore, and I'm sure people will be like, "Hey, I wish Amir would have asked this question." If someone wants to reach out to you to pick your brain on this or maybe something else, what is a good way of reaching out to you?
Yeah. So first of all this, things I've learned and I'm learning, I actually put on my blog. It's called the CTO Toolbox. So I'd encourage people to just do a search for it. You should find it. It talks about Ship It as well. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Just look for Siddharth Ram. I'm at Velocity Global. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much, Amir. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. I'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think we covered a lot of stuff about Velocity Global's Ship It Hackathon. Hopefully, there's a lot of value there. Share it with somebody else that might also benefit. That's how the podcast has grown. So thank you for that. Like, subscribe, comment, review. Let me know if there's a topic you want me to cover. I'll find a guest to talk about it if I can. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.